Hello, welcome. I think everyone should just have about joined by now. So welcome to this webinar today, all about mobile compatibility testing, what, why, when and how. So just for your info, there'll be a couple of webinars being created about other types of testing, about accessibility and project regression, which will be following in the next couple of months, which I'll be walking through. So look out for a few other ones after this one. So just as way of introduction, so I'm Charlotte Hayes. I'm a principal consultant here at Ten10 and I manage our digital test lab, which is based from the Leeds office. The digital lab provides solutions for clients who maybe are looking to develop a new application or upgrade to support their business growth and require some independent testing. Or they have a requirement to meet industry regulations and require some, say, accessibility testing to check against the standards. And also some clients that want to ensure that any new changes to their existing applications are still going to be working as expected. So they must make monthly releases. So this could be against browsers, devices and operating systems. So all of these types of testing fall into the digital test lab that I manage. The digital test lab provides companies with a comprehensive range of independent and specialist testing services to meet individual company digital demands. So today's webinar's agenda will cover an introduction to mobile compatibility testing, what it is, why we need to do this, what are the implications of not testing. And also we'll go through some mobile trends and some metrics to consider when we need to compatibility test, and how useful these trends and metrics are to us. Also, how can we implement best practice techniques when we are mobile compatibility testing. So if you do have any questions, these can be answered at the end of the webinar. Also, this webinar will be available to download from our website once this is finished. So these next slides are going to cover what mobile compatibility testing is, what types of testing there is included in this, and what types of platforms we can test against. So what do people really think the term mobile compatibility means? Well, I put a summary of what I found mobile compatibility was. So it is to check or validate that your application behaves as expected across the combination of mobile devices, operating systems and browsers, which pretty much sums it up, but we'll go into more detail around types of compatibility testing and types of applications that potentially you'll be testing against and the differences of each. As you know, the digital world is evolving and the customer experience is pretty key right now. So as new devices and mobiles are readily available, we need to ensure that we've got the specified device and all the OS operating systems available so we can validate and do a thorough round of compatibility testing. So compatibility testing, the different types of applications you might come across. So testing a new website across several browsers and mobile devices. So this website could be a responsive website. So you're looking at the key user journeys using just your browser, and then the browser will then be quite responsive and intuitive to what device that user is using, and it will adjust the screen sizes accordingly. So the content that you see on the mobile device should mirror what's on the website, and it should the changes in terms of content should still be on the site, but it will be changed and viewed slightly differently because of it being a mobile and the size of it. So that's that website testing. So onto native apps. So if you are thinking about native app testing, which is essentially a smartphone application which is coded for iOS and Android versions separately. So native apps do provide quite fast performance and quite good reliability. And these apps are really good if you want to build a performance critical mobile app. But this also app tends to be quite expensive, because it is developed over one type of operating system, which means multiple versions of the app may be required to work across other platforms. so that's where the expense comes in for that one. If you're looking at a hybrid app, so this is a web app or a web page which uses the phone's native browser, so for example not Safari or Chrome, what you might normally use, but has platform compatibility, so the updates are limited, and limited updates needed for the actual app to make the changes, so the costs are kept low at that point. The hybrid apps typically don't perform as quickly as native apps as they use that native browser. Other applications is a progressive web app, which is a web application which is delivered through using regular web pages or websites, but can appear to a user like a traditional application or native mobile app. So they're built using common web technologies including HTML, CSS and JavaScript, and they're intended to work on any platform that uses a standard compliant browser, so therefore that cuts down that cost as well, so it should be compliant with all. The web app provides more features in line with a native app offered by most modern browsers, with the benefit of a mobile experience and to perform faster. They can easily be updated and tested without going through that long process of the App Store where you have to install them before starting to test. So those are sort of just a key summary of the types of applications you might be testing as part of mobile compatibility. So other types of compatibility then, sort of areas of testing to look out for. So if we move on to hardware configuration, so this is where the app has been developed and potentially against a specific device or laptop or mobile, what has a specific camera model or the size of screen. So you have to make sure that the software is compatible with these different types of hardware, and obviously using different operating systems while there. So the operating system, obviously, whereas the apps and website could have been built or developed based on the latest operating system, and so other previous versions might not be compatible with it. So it's really useful to test on the current one, even the beta one, and then the previous version to make sure that it all works and the look and feel and the customer journey looks okay. And then testing the software, so the application, the web app or the website, to validate the look and feel. Is the software consistent throughout all the devices? For example, the My Account in a section of the app might be visible on iOS but not visible on Android, so can the user easily navigate to it? Can they log in? All these types of things you need to make sure that you can check and make sure they're consistent across each platform. Another area of testing is networks, so testing for any network inconsistencies when you're using the app. So the software is validated on the basis of fluctuating parameters such as capacity, bandwidth, operating speed, so checking that when you're using the app it's not slow, it's not slowing down by the amount of users using it. Can it only be used on the Wi-Fi, or can you use it on 3G, 4G, even 5G? Validating if the Wi-Fi or the G loses connection, that the app or the website doesn't lose the data that the user has entered. These types of things, so network throttling essentially to make sure that the app can stand up to lower connections. So that one's really useful. Testing across multiple browsers, this is really beneficial because some browsers do look and feel differently to others. So Chrome and IE or Edge may look different from each other. So Chrome is one of the popular browsers, and sometimes the other ones can be forgotten about or not deemed that important, whereas IE, if you log on to IE or Edge, this is a different look and should definitely be tested to make sure that the website or the web app looks and feels the same and functions correctly. This obviously is dependent on your user base, so if there's no need to test against all the browsers and your user is only going to be using Chrome or Safari, then then that should just be that coverage. So it really does depend on your user base. So the other types are obviously testing across multiple devices in terms of screen sizes, pixels, camera stats, operating systems. So considering all the other above areas and across all the different multiple devices. So as you can imagine, the scope of the work starts to really increase to making sure that you're fitting in and allowing all the different operating systems and sizes of the screens and cameras, etc., depending on what your requirements or your business requirements are. So to cover off some types of compatibility issues that are typically identified between browser and a mobile device whilst testing. So these are some of the typical things you might find. So content, issues can be found around the content within the app or the web app, regardless of it being responsive or not. So whether the web browser size is changed to mirror a phone screen size, does this site respond to this, allow all the contents on the website to be visible on the device screen and function correctly, however looking slightly different to accommodate the screen sizes. So this is really interesting to have a look at. If you're looking at your browser and you've got your screen open and you're looking exactly at the same image on your mobile, is it the same? Is the user journey as easy to follow? Does it flow correctly? Can you see how to access certain areas as well as you can the browser? So there's lots of different types of things you can look out for in terms of content. So in terms of navigation, a mobile device can be really different to the website browsers, where obviously we have a mouse to scroll down using the browser, whereas devices you use your finger to scroll down or around the site. So the navigation fields using a mouse versus a selection using a finger press on a device. So those are the key differences. So can you, using a finger press, select the field and type in some content like you would with a browser? So size, I think we've probably mentioned a few bits, but being able to adjust the screen size, but also being able to zoom in and out. So if you're looking at a website and you can't see it very well, it might be a really good idea to zoom in. Will the button that was initially zoomed out, does that adjust to fit to the page? Equally, when you zoom back out, will that button adjust accordingly as well in size? So functions and features, so components behavior is not all predictable using different mobiles and operating systems. So there have been some bugs where, for example, a feature works on the most current version of an operating system but doesn't work on the previous version. So it's really important that we keep up to date with all the new operating systems or browser versions that are coming out, to make sure that the apps are built to these specs, but also that they are backward compatible, so that they will actually work with other lower ones. Because as you are aware, when you are sort of forced or enforced to upgrade your mobile device, not everyone will do this at the same time. So it's really important that we have one or two older versions of an Android and iOS for this very reason. So as part of a project or a program, it's really beneficial for regular reviews to take place around new devices coming into the market and new OS and browser versions as they come down the line, and equally removing older versions and users of those. So also sort of considering the end of life for these older versions. So based on the user base, the application type, whether it's web app, responsive, native, hybrid, and also which platform, so iOS or Android, you can sort of decide if there's any support available for these older types, and if not, should really de-scope them. Also looking the addition of new devices, new hardware, what releases are coming up in the future, which ones are becoming and deemed more popular with clients, customers, looking at the user base, also in addition looking at the analytics that potentially you would have as part of a website or a web app. Again, if you don't have analytics and it is a new app, you would just go to the market and see what's deemed popular at the moment. This will give you a good idea and a good scope of testing. So you also advance warning of new OS versions or upgrades. Again, this is just making sure that if we are testing, it's pretty much like a regression test to make sure on a mobile device the apps that we have previously been testing work still with the new operating systems. So device combinations are decided based on the app type, the OS and the device usage. So when you're thinking about creating a project and what is your scope, what do we need to test, think about your user base, think about who's using the app or the website, what are your key customers. So if their customer is someone who's older, so they may not have the most up-to-date devices, so the most popular devices may be a device that's an older version, or it could be an app that's geared towards students or someone new to working, and so they are probably going to have the most up-to-date devices and operating systems and be on the tech side of things. So it's very much decided upon, you know, what your user base is. Push new software. So again, this is all around software and pulling new devices and browsers and versions all together. So as you can imagine, your scope basically increases a lot based on what you want to test and what's your target audience. There are different types of testing that cover mobile compatibility, as we covered in the earlier slide, of which some warrant using physical devices and some that would work really well with an emulator or adoption of cloud-based services like BrowserStack to give you access to a wider range of devices. The user experience is obviously a key driver, so a physical drive should be used as well as an emulator. So as you can see, some of these stats already suggest that there's a real mix of real and simulators being used, which are real rise from 34% up to 77% today. So purchasing and maintaining all these multiple mobile devices may be costly for some companies, while using, say, a cloud-based emulator solution where you connect to a physical device cuts down that cost and maintenance. However, there are some areas that having a physical device just can't replace. A few examples of this could be the UI and the UX aspects of an app, including the colour and the brightness displayed. This is difficult to capture on an emulator. So if you're looking at seeing if a user would be able to use this app if they were colourblind, and if the brightness, you couldn't decide how bright this app was going to be, you would definitely need to get the physical device to see it in person and then test that brightness and to check that everyone would be okay with viewing the app. So testing performance of an app on a mobile device usually gives a more accurate result compared to testing on an emulator, where it's usually slower to respond. Validating battery scenarios, so mobile devices can perform this test as required, whereas emulators and simulators usually are just not able to mimic the issues relating to a battery. Similarly, sort of Wi-Fi network throttling scenarios where you want to use 3G and then you want to turn off connection completely. These types of scenarios would have to be done on a physical device versus because a simulator would just not be able to accurately decide if the data was lost or not, etc. So that would be difficult to test. Also, you know, checking responsiveness to touch and scrolling and the camera and the sounds. If you know these can't be heard or looked at in terms of camera, so all of these types of things, it just again it depends on what app, on what website you're trying to test and what your user base is. If these things are the real key things with your app, then definitely using a physical device is the way to go. However, if it is just a URL that you can log on to and it's a web app or a website, then usually simulators, web-based cloud services are really useful for this kind of thing. Okay, so why do we need to test and what are the implications of not testing? So I thought I'd give you a few facts around mobile users, which might me some surprise, might not be. So consumers spend more than 5 hours a day on their smartphone, which is over half a working day every day. So that equates to 35 hours a week. People are averaging 24 hours a week online, which is twice as long as 10 years ago, with 1 in 5 adults spending as much as 40 hours a week on the web. So that might not come as any shock to people, as everyone has a mobile nowadays and using more and more time on their smartphone. So 4 out of 5 consumers use smartphones to shop, so this shouldn't surprise anyone. Mobile users are shoppers, and smart retailers are recognising this trend and incentivising the use of mobile phones within the store, so using discounts to target mobile users. Many restaurants are doing the same thing by offering a free drink or an appetizer for those that check in using a specific app. 80% of internet users own a smartphone, so tablets are close to 50% of internet users report having one personally, although whether previous rates of growth will continue in the face of ever-improving smartphones, especially in the phablet space, will be a key metric to watch in the year ahead, I should imagine. So that was an interesting one. 52.2% of traffic was mobile in 2018, so due to the strong growth of the smartphone market in recent years, this probably isn't a surprise, especially as mobile internet often provides a more viable online connection in regions that lack infrastructure or money for traditional and more expensive landline connections, so mobile will be the most popular choice to access web. 70% of mobile customers who find business online will act within 1 hour. This is an interesting fact, I think, for companies with heavily customer-focused websites. This figure is 3 times higher than desktop, so if they have a good customer experience, then they'll no doubt use the app and the site over and over again and recommend it to their friends. And then on the flip side, if they find the site hard to navigate and the buttons aren't working, then they're less likely to be happy or to be a returning customer. The number of mobile devices is forecast to reach 16.8 billion by 2023. Mobile devices, as we know, are growing in popularity every year. In 2001, the share of monthly active tablet users is estimated to reach 64.8% of the total population. Yes, the market is expanding rapidly for mobile, and Apple is still the leading vendor of tablets worldwide. In the fourth quarter of 2018, around 9.67 million iPads were sold worldwide. So based on some of these stats above, you can see some mobile usage is increasing and more apps are being created. So this is the ever-growing digital world. So the demand for compatibility testing to ensure user experiences are positive, and then they revisit the sites and apps time and time again. So what are the implications of not testing? So here are some of the some companies that have been in the news recently. So Microsoft are discontinuing support for Office mobile apps on older Android devices such as KitKat and Lollipop. This support finishes in June. So as mentioned earlier, sort of testing across every device, OS and browser combination just isn't feasible, but Microsoft are ensuring people upgrade to a new OS to ensure that the better customer experience, so that is pretty good in terms of customer experience, so they're getting it and based on the new OSs. Another 2 companies in the news this year with apps crashing and being down, Facebook and WhatsApp being very popular apps to use. The implications of not testing could potentially cause reputational damage to companies if they don't start compatibility testing and ensuring that these apps are fit for customer use and that they can do performance as required. Just means that customers won't come back to their apps, and they'll tell their friends, and it's word of mouth. There's also social media, these will be on there to explain that I've had a bad experience with this app. So definitely in terms of why we should be testing and what are the implications, these pretty much show them. So if we get compatibility testing right first time, then we'll stop these type of things happening and being advertised on social media in a more positive light, which in turn allows repeat customers and building up a big customer base. So we're just moving on to sort of mobile trends and metrics just to walk through and consider when we're looking at compatibility testing and when you're putting a project together. So on to a few metrics, and these next two slides show the breakdown of percentage of users following OS for both Android and iOS. So this one, Android, just shows the market version breakdown. So data was collected in 2019, which show that currently Oreo 8.1 is the and 6.0 Marshmallow look to be the most popular OSs at the moment for Android. As you can see when we move to the next slide, the iOS has less operating systems than Android. So here we can see that in iOS 12, 83% of all devices introduced in the last 4 years were iOS 12. And 80% of devices are using iOS 12, so it shows that iOS are enforcing their upgrades more than Android. So typically when you're choosing sort of types of projects, you have to make sure that you're choosing the right operating system in terms of Android as well as iOS. This slide shows sort of mobile vendor market shares against the United Kingdom, Europe and worldwide. So here you can see in the UK, Apple is the most popular device, dominant in the UK than anywhere else, and that worldwide more consumers use Samsung as the most popular, but that Apple and Samsung are the majority used worldwide, and the Huawei being more popular amongst Europeans. So it's really interesting to see in terms of the UK is slightly different to Europe and worldwide. So if an app or a website has been developed and and it's more targeted toward like a US customer base or European, so please bear in mind what types of mobile devices they may be using in that country. So this will give you different scope based on your customer base. Now for some best practice takeaways from mobile compatibility testing. So this slide we're going to walk through some of the overarching considerations about when you're looking to scope a new project. So the first one being the customer experience is key. So we saw companies in the news which brings potential reputational damage and word of mouth through social media. So it's very important to make a customer's journey as positive as possible. Ensure that the requirements from the customer, what they want the app to be or look like and function are key. So making sure that what the app has been developed is exactly what the customer was looking for. Other things to consider, the compatibility differences between browser and device. So compared to the app and the differences between them, ensure you're offering a customer a consistently easy journey through the website and the app. Look at these key differences and making sure they're consistent. Move from functional validation to customer experience validation. How well does it work and how easy is it? Using a more hybrid functional model. So now we're including more usability into the testing, taking into the account the simple flows and create personas to replicate a specific user accessing the website or app. The thing is to ensure mobile device coverage is correct for the product or the application under test. Make sure you review the analytics of the site or the app. Again, if it's a new app, look at some stats around the most popular devices to make sure you're targeting your key audience. Determine secondary low priority requirements. So if the scope of the devices is too large, mixture of operating system, hardware specifications, browser types, look to prioritize the list and determine which are the less popular devices being used, or cut out some of the devices that are nearing end of life and that are no longer supported. And finally, look to extend your coverage through cloud providers, so Browser Stack or Perfecto Mobile, etc., to get a broad coverage if possible, so things that are operating systems that have just come out or devices that are really new to the market. So it's really useful to have a mixture of physical devices and cloud services. As we round up this webinar, let's talk about some best practice and some key takeaways from this session. So I think we've talked through some of these areas already in previous slides, but understanding what's most important to you and your users. So making sure that the app or the website is suitable for your user base. So making sure that you know your customers, who they are, what your target audience is, what devices they are they into tech, are they not into tech, are they going to have the most popular devices, you know, what's the scope of it, will you need to use desktops or browsers in scope. So understanding your customers is key for this. So what do you want to get out of the app, or who's your target audience? So a single user journey can span multiple channels. So a typical user may start the journey using their devices, so it could be an Android device, for example, and then finish a transaction with a desktop device. So, you know, we could be using a browser. So this will be useful if you could sort of be mindful at the beginning of what your target audience is. So you need to look at creating some personas perhaps to help aid with this, to make sure that you know exactly what the priority journeys would be for each of your customers. A risk-based approach to provide the right blend of effort and coverage without exposing unnecessary risks. So ensuring that you have your correct target user base and having a pragmatic approach to what you deem a priority to test, making sure all key project stakeholders are signed up to this approach, and examining ways to optimize and accelerate testing. So you can look at sort of what devices and what your scope is for testing at now, and look to accelerate this testing. It could be automation, or it could be using cloud-based services to ensure a swifter, smoother testing process. However, you know, it could be that your target users are all that you need a physical device for all your target users. So it's understanding and reviewing what you're doing now and seeing how you can accelerate the testing to the future. So I think I've slightly gone over the time, but if anyone's got any questions, feel free to ask.